Week 3, Eye of the Storm. We're talking about the storms of life that hit us, and it could be anything from hurricanes to tornadoes to a rumbling underneath the surface. You see, this morning I woke up at the ripe time of about midnight. And I rolled over and I grabbed my phone to see that, it's probably around 4 or 5 o'clock, and I saw midnight and I thought, yay. And it wasn't over a 20-year-old quarterback who twisted an ankle. I woke up at midnight, I woke up again at 2, and then at 3, and then at 4, and at 4 I got up. And there was an unsettling. I'll be honest, I've looked at this message 14 different ways, and even up until this morning, I wasn't really sure how I was going to kind of approach it, because there is this message of all storms is one that can rip some scabs off. And as I was praying this morning, I was asking God, which way do you want me to go? Because I know that this morning He put on me that I am going to be speaking to one person this morning. I don't know who it is, and I don't begin to know through asking. It's up to Him to speak to you. But we're going into this third week with what's called Big D storms. Last week we named some storms. We had some signage up here and we named some storms. I could have just as easily have named the ones who stir the storms up. I believe, and I sent out an email, and I know that I'm not getting into a Halloween kick up here, but this is what I know. Cassie and I have been in ministry for about 15 years, and October ushers in the holiday season, right? The Christmas season, Thanksgiving, Halloween, all of that, so it's big holiday time. But we could set a clock to it. We could set a clock to October and a clock to about a month before Easter, that the enemy just does a number on people. He does. He gets into marriages and strife and the spirit of disunity and anxiety and depression. And there's a verse that I think we throw around really flippantly. It's found in Ephesians 6:12, and it says, "We are not battling against flesh and blood, but against real enemies." And then it goes on to describe them. It says, "Against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." And I believe once you physically encounter it, you don't ever want to mess with it again. And so this week, I know over the holiday season, and don't mistake me saying holiday for not wanting to say Christmas, I encompass all of it. But I know over the holiday season that the Big D storms are going to churn like no other. And I know that oftentimes in church we try to come in and we try to fake our way through it, and we, fake it till you make it. And I can't let anybody know that it's going on. And if you don't fake it, we see people going through a storm and we cliche it and we bumper sticker it. And we looked last week at some mighty men of faith. Peter, who was ready to die and ended up running scared. We looked at a guy by the name of David who wrote the Psalms. And this is a guy that wrote the 23rd Psalm. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Like, you make me lie down in green pastures. You restore my soul. Oh, what a beautiful picture. And that's in Psalm 23. And then Psalm 55, you look later and he's like, "My heart is overwhelmed." And I think that the Big D storms throughout the holidays have the propensity to overwhelm. When I look at storms, I watch the Weather Channel in the morning. I'm a nerd, I guess, but I watch the Weather Channel. And when a hurricane's coming, I start watching it from, when it comes off the coast of Africa, and they start trying to track it, and they've got this cone. And some storms, they pick up huge, right? And they're coming right at us, and they change directions and go back out to sea. When you look at like our friends in the movie Twister, you can have all of the right conditions. You can get that green sky. You can get that really still, you can get James Spann with his tie off. That's when his shirt comes off, run for cover. Right? But you can have all the right conditions and it may never happen. You can even have a funnel cloud, it may never happen. Or It can drop straight out of the sky and destroy everything about you. I lived in Southern California for a little while, and you're always under an earthquake watch. There's always a rumbling just underneath the surface. And I believe that's what our life looks like. There's always storms. We can't stop them. I think a lot of times in church we kind of have this mentality of like, well, you know, if I just accept Jesus, everything's going to be great and gold's going to fall from the sky and I'll never have any more problems and everybody will love me and my marriage will never have a problem and my kids will grow up to be like the president or a preacher. Man, everything's going to go great, right? But the truth of it is, after you accept Christ, the enemy is going to come at you harder than you've ever had. Because now you can change the outcome of not just your world, but you can actually change the outcome of the kingdom. And a lot of that you can do by your story. We heard Katie's story, a phenomenal story of somebody who's doing everything right and a storm hits her marriage. And it wasn't anything she did or could have done to avoid it. It hit, and what we saw was the beauty that came out of the storm. There's always beauty out of a storm. But this week we're looking at the big D storms. Pick your D. It can be doubt. It can be depression. It could be despair. Well, just have more faith, right? Or we manipulate it that you know, if you trusted God more, you wouldn't doubt. If you trusted God more, you wouldn't fear. If you trusted God, if you were really sold out, you could just walk right through it. And I believe that the church has honestly done somewhat of a bad job when it comes to mental illness. I think we're catching up, but I think oftentimes we'll hammer on it's a weakness rather than walking through and overcoming it. I got an article from my buddy Hugh not too long ago. There's a pastor, and I've mentioned him before, out in California, and he was an advocate. He wrote books on the subject of depression, and he took his life. And I sit there and I think that guy's surrounded by thousands. He's got a full staff. He's got congregation. He's got groups. I'm sure he was in a small group. I'm sure he was on a reach team. I'm sure he went to Sunday school. I'm sure he did all the right things. But somewhere the enemy crept into his mind at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place and the wrong time. And he did the unthinkable. And he took his life. And I know going into the holiday season that this storm has the propensity to slam into us harder than any other. I don't want to get into the whys of mental health issues. I mean, it's the unrelenting pursuit of satisfaction, the unrelenting comparison trap that we see. I could blame social media. I could blame school bullying. I could blame a lot of things. The National Alliance for Mental Health, though, actually said this. I don't want to get into what all causes it, because I think it's a multifaceted issue. But the National Alliance of Mental Illness says this: 64% suffer from anxiety and depression over the holiday season. At a minimum, it increases, but 24% say that it is a lot worse and almost crushing. It's a storm that comes every year. It comes in social isolation. It's a fancy word for this: I didn't get invited to the party. You see, we live in this Instagram world and Facebook world, and you jump on there and you see all your friends, and they're all at this party, and it's this party and you knew them, right? And everybody's liking it and talking about it, and frankly, you don't want to like it because you weren't there. And then all these thoughts get into your head about, why wasn't I invited? And I'm not good enough, and they don't like me, and they don't love me. And we live in this world of seeing the things that we're missing out on in the social world. It could be loneliness. 66% of people say that at family gatherings, they see all of these big family gatherings, right? And they see all the big turkeys and the big spread, and you see tables of people, and you walk into church and you hear people tell all these great stories about, yeah, I'm going to my family, and man, we're going to sit around and we're going to eat this big dinner. And I've sat at tables with veterans who had nobody. And over Thanksgiving, it's crushing because you see and you hear all of these great stories, and the truth of it is you may not have anybody to cut a turkey with. Or you've got a whole row of chairs, and there's a place setting. They're not coming. And it's crushing. And it's a storm. And it's a storm you can't fix because they may never even be coming back. But if you have more faith, right? You see, the bumper sticker doesn't cover the empty chair. The bumper sticker doesn't cover the heart that feels isolated and lonely. The bumper sticker doesn't cover 3 o'clock in the morning when the demons are at bay and they're just dancing all in your mind. If you just had more faith, right? So I picked out a couple of other big-name faith guys this week. There's a guy by the name of Job. We love Job, right? Because Job's the story of the guy who went through it all, and he persevered, and man, he just battled and never had any bad thoughts. It's Job, right? If you want to read that story, it's found in the book of Job. Job 14:19, as water wears away the stones and floods wash away the soil, so you destroy people's hope. That was to God. As water washes away, God, you destroy people's hope. That's a bracelet we're going to get made this Christmas season. We're going to put that in kids' ministry. Hey, kids, take this home to your parents. God, you destroy hope. No. We look at Job, and Job's a phenomenal story about perseverance, but there was a time that Job cried out, and he said, hey, you're destroying my hope. He lost his family. He lost everything he had. But we don't put that on a bracelet. Jeremiah, one of the mightiest prophets, got 2 books in there. Jeremiah, Lamentations. He was known as a weeping prophet. He cried out to God constantly for his people. He was a prayer warrior. Jeremiah 15:18. Why is my pain perpetual and my wound incurable, which refuses to be healed? Will you surely be to me like an unreliable stream, a waters that fail? There's some translations where he actually calls God a liar. Now, I don't know about you. I grew up in scary church. You don't call God a liar. Lightning bolt, done. But this is Jeremiah, mighty prophet, mighty man of God. 2 books in the Bible, right? Hey, hello. You see, storms come, and in the middle of the storm, crying out to God, we see over and over and over, and we like to pick out the amazing stories. But some of the greatest men and women of faith had moments where doubt and depression creeped into their hearts and into their mind. You see, I think a lot of it is expectations. We come in on Sunday morning and it's Disney World, right? Everything's working, lights are going, worship team's rocking, high-fiving, Krispy Kreme. You know Jesus is here. But we come in, it's Disney World, and we have this expectation because a guy like me stands up here and he's like, you know, if you just, you can and all of that. But ultimately there's times when your heart is crushed and it's overwhelmed. And it's a expectation, and the definition of frustration is an unmet expectation. We have thousands of expectations. When I walk in to my house and turn on the light, I expect it to come on, and when it doesn't, I get frustrated. When you open the fridge, you expect stuff to be cold, and when it doesn't, those are small expectations. We have expectations of God, and I think sometimes those expectations don't match up to what we think ought to be happening. I've got buddies in Texas, and they came to the University of Alabama to watch the Aggies play. It's been several years ago. Some of you, if you were at the game, you'll definitely remember this one. So they come in, and we're beating them, and I mean the crowd's just kind of sitting. It's 155 degrees, and the water tower ran out of water, and so there's no bathroom. 100,000 people. There's no bathroom, and there's no water. And everybody's hot, and they're miserable. And my buddy looks at me, and he said, I just thought this would be different. And I was like, me too. It's an expectation. And he walked away, And he's like, man, if I never come back to a Bama game, and I don't care, it's football. I don't care if he ever comes back. I mean, why would you drive that far to lose? But here's the deal, is I sit there, he's watching. As I sit there, we have unmet expectations. And when we have unmet expectations, we often never go back to it because it was easier before I had an expectation. Right? It's easier to live in that big D storm if I know it's going to be there. But if I've expected God not to send a storm my way and a storm comes, now all of a sudden there's an unmet expectation. You see, I think all throughout Scripture there were expectations. We're going to look at a story this morning. Tim preached on it a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to follow up with it. It's found in 1 Kings. It's a guy by the name of Elijah, and he is literally one of the mightiest prophets of God. We're coming out of the story where he's up there, and he had prayed, and there'd been no rain for years, and he had called all of Baal's prophets, and he was out there talking smack, and they were going to, bring fire down, and I love Elijah. He's talking all kind of mad stuff at them, and they can't do it. And then he says like a one-paragraph prayer, and God just zapped. There it is, wet wood and all. So he had just prayed in a miracle from God. And then we pick up when Ahab got home, so that's the king. He told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah: may the God strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you killed them. Elijah was afraid, and he fled for his life. I want to stop right there. I've been always wondering, I'm like, Elijah just saw God rain fire down. He just saw a huge miracle, and this lady sends him a letter, and he's running for his life. What would make him scared to death? And I think it's because she was a mad mama. You ever seen mamas? Like, you can watch a dad get upset. Dad's got lines, right? How many of y'all got a spanking growing up? I did. I got a bunch of them. My dad would pull his belt out. He's not in this service. Everybody looks at me like, CB? I'm like, yeah, CB. He pulled that belt out, right? And you know that sound. It's like, oh no. It's like dads have a line. They're like, don't make me pull the car over. I don't. Don't make me. I don't. But moms, you just never know. Their lines move, and I love the mamas in here. But my mama was an equal opportunity spanker. I'd be like, whatever. One time she'd be like, I'd be like, whatever. The next time, don't you whatever me, whack. You'd be walking into church with your mama, and she got gritted teeth, smiling at everybody else and telling you you're going to die. Buddies be walking up, they'd be like, what'd your mama say? Because they can do it to where you can only hear it. I'd be like, man, mama going to kill me, run. You're going to die too if you stand here. But Elijah got a letter and he ran. And he went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary tree and prayed that he might die. Elijah, one of the mightiest prophets in the Bible, suicidal. I've had enough, Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. Had enough. He just came out of the most awesome miracle in the Bible, short of Jesus. Had enough. I find it interesting that he had gone alone. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Lord said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah replied, I've zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you. They've torn down your altars. They've killed every one of your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. That's funny. He's got the audio version and he's quoting the verse I'm reading. Go out and stand before me on the mountain, the Lord told him. As Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose. but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak. He went out and he stood at the entrance of the cave. You see, Elijah had a perspective problem. He had just done this amazing miracle, seen it, and now he had walked off alone, and in his brain, nobody else would understand. Nobody else was out there. I am all alone. I just want it over. I just want it over. I'm all alone. I did what you said, and it is not better. I did what you said, and now I'm running for my life. Hello? I'm all alone. You see, a storm perspective will always cause you to despair and doubt your destiny. One of the greatest prophets, God was going to use him in a huge, huge way, but he was so blinded by the storm. You see, a huge wind, a huge fire, a huge earthquake. He saw all that, but you know where he heard God? In the most gentle whisper. Because far too often when you're in the middle of the storm, you're focused on the storm and not on God. Katie made an amazing statement in her video. She said, I looked up. You see, Elijah was focused on all the things that were wrong. He was focused on the storm. And he screamed, God, where are you? And there's some of you in here. There's some of you in here that are screaming out, God, where are you? There's some of you in here that actually believe that he's not listening, that he doesn't care, that he's not paying attention. If you're like me, you believed your past might be so bad that he's given up. Like he's got this cosmic scale. And like if I could just do enough good, then maybe he'll start to hear. And I just want to tell you this morning that your faith is more important than your failure. Your faith in Christ is way more important than anything you've ever done wrong. God isn't up there weighing it out on a scale. He's up there and he's listening and he's hearing and he wants to protect his child. But I think far too often we're focused on all of the things and all of the things that are wrong and all of the loneliness and all of the depression and everything else in the storm. And we can't hear the whisper of God. You see, Jesus says, I already paid for that. See, I've already paid for that. You don't have to live in that anymore. Loneliness, I'm right here. I never left. I never went anywhere. I'm right here. Just focus on me. My blood covers that. My blood covers the loneliness. My blood covers the mistake. My blood covers the sin. My blood covers the grief. My blood covers it all. So what do you do? What do you do when you're in the middle of a storm and you're like Elijah and you can't see anything and you just want it over? Joshua 1:9 says, this is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. You see, I think we've got to put it in perspective. The Lord never said that the storms would stop. He never said the battles would cease. You see, the Lord never said that people would stop coming against you. He never said people would stop talking trash. He never said the world wouldn't get darker. As a matter of fact, he told us quite the opposite. He said it's going to get worse before it gets better when I come back. He didn't say that the world would try to drown you. He didn't say that the enemy of offense, slander, and disunity would stop. Just because you're in church doesn't stop it. He didn't say that out of nowhere a tornado could come and shake the foundation of everything you know. He didn't say that there wouldn't be grief. As a matter of fact, he said there is a time appointed to die. But what he did say is he said, I'm with you. He said, I'll never leave or forsake you. He said, I'm with you. Even at your loneliness, I'm with you. Even when you feel like you don't have a friend in the world, Elijah, I'm right here. Even when your pillow is soaked at night, because you realize this will be a holiday without that person. Even when you call and they don't pick up the phone, He said, you're not alone. He said, we're in the valley of the shadow of death. When you're laying on a table, when you're at the doctor's office, and fear has gripped you to the point where you can't see anything else. He says, take my hand. I'm right there with you. At 3 a.m, when the demons are screaming the loudest, and you just want to pull the covers over your head, He says, I'm with you. When you're at a gravesite and you're trying to figure out why nobody else in your platoon made it home, He said, I'm with you. He says, I'll never leave or forsake you. There's 3 things we can do to help hear the voice of God. First is this, write this down because you may need it this holiday season. Look backwards for perspective. Look backwards for perspective. This is one constant of every single storm. If you're sitting in here today, there is a common denominator. You made it out of it. There is a common denominator. You made it out of it. There's also a common denominator of every single storm I've been a part of. I've been around tornadoes. I've been around hurricanes. I've been around earthquakes. I haven't been in a big forest fire, but I've been around the other 3. And there's one common denominator about every single storm. What is that? Anybody? There's always a sunrise after. Always. There's always a sunrise after the storm. As a matter of fact, I saw a bunch of y'all. There was apparently a great night sky the other night. It's beautiful. I saw pictures all over the place. Here's the crazy thing. The sunrise after the storm is often the most beautiful sunrise you will ever see. When you look back over the entirety of your lifetime, you can't argue the promise of God. Katie talked about it in her story. Many of you have this story. In the middle of a storm, it's hard to grasp, but when you look back at every storm in your life, this is one constant you will see. He never left you. He never left you. The next thing you can do is this. Look up. Look up. You see, when you look up, what you realize, in the middle of a storm, you see a wave. In the middle of a storm, you see debris. In the middle of a storm, you see things swirling. In the middle of a storm, you hear everything that's said against you. You can't focus because you see the tornado. But here's the truth of it. When you have big waves and you look up, what you often see is the eye of a storm. And you know what the eye of the storm is? It's the calmest part of the storm. Even a Category 5 has an eye. It's the eye of the storm. There's 1,000 things in our world that we can reach for. There's 1,000 things in our world that we can look to, whether it be drugs or alcohol or work or baseball, or there's 100 things that we could dive into to mask the hurt. There's 100 things that we can look to try to get through the storm. But God says, not only do I bring the storms, I control the storms. And I am the one that can get you through the storm. And the truth of it is, I think I've tried them all. The truth of it is, I think in the middle of some of the worst storms I've been in, I have tried them all. I've asked Caroline to come up and sing a song. You see, one of the things that they teach you in scuba diving is that when you go down, if you get lost, because there's this point when you can actually get disoriented, they say this, they say, find the light and swim towards it. I think oftentimes around holiday season, we have storms raging, people talking. And here's the truth of it. You can look backwards and you can look up. But the biggest thing that got Elijah through the storm is he listened up. He listened up. He didn't focus on the windstorm. He didn't focus on the earthquake. He didn't focus on the fire. He focused on the voice of the Most High God. And God didn't come with a big booming voice. He didn't sound like Darth Vader. He whispered. And he spoke to Elijah. The enemy will get into your thoughts. And he'll tell you things that are lies. He'll tell you nobody loves you. He'll tell you nobody's with you. He'll tell you that you're all alone. He'll tell you you don't want to live. He'll get you to a place where you think there is no hope. Can I tell you where I found the most hope is not at the top of the water, it's at the bottom. Because that's where the anchor is. When you hit your rock bottom, Jesus says, I am there. Look up and listen to me.
I was born and raised in Tuscaloosa, been here all my life, and I had the most amazing family. My mom and dad are seriously the best people I've ever met. So I stage managed for children's theater, and that's actually where I met my husband. I started dating a guy, and we were very serious and dated all through college, and actually ended up getting married at the end of college. And life was good, and we were busy and doing theater things together and things like that. And I was working at First Baptist and running their daycare and teaching Sunday school and those kinds of things, and had Henderson, our first child, and life kind of derailed. So that didn't leave me time to be at the theater all the time and hanging out there. And so I kind of had my life with Henderson at home, and my husband was doing theater things. And so, kind of drifted us apart, but he had his fun there, and I was happy with Henderson at home. And my husband wasn't making choices that were good for our family, having relationships with other women that were not appropriate. And for many years I just forgave and kept on, and had a dream as a little girl to be a mom and to be an amazing wife and have a family. And it was really hard to walk through those times of like, well, it's not what I dreamed of, but I'm not quitting on it. And I walked in darkness for a long time by myself. I was really embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I couldn't keep my marriage together, and that my husband wasn't faithful, that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't make him happy, that our 3 amazing kids weren't enough to fight for. And so after multiple affairs and multiple chances, and me offering the world, let's go to counseling, let's fight for this, and it just being halfway, and also seeking godly counsel, definitely, it just was not going anywhere. And that's what, God very clearly just gave me this peace about his promise that he would never leave or forsake me. And honestly, like, just the scriptures that we talk about, like, he works all things for good. He really met me in that promise, and I believed him, and I took a step of faith and trusted that he would do what he said he would do. And so I actually kept it pretty quiet that I was walking through divorce, and there was shame, of course, and also I didn't know how people would take it. I mean, I was on staff. I was supposed to have it all together. There were times early on that I did question. I was, why? At times I felt really lonely. I had people that loved me surrounding me. My family was incredible. My friends were incredible. But even in that, I felt like really lonely at times. Like, God was so good, like, and so faithful. One night it had been a really rough day, and so the kids were asleep, their dad was home, and I just went for a drive, and I ended up in the back of the church in the parking lot, just sitting in my car with the worship music blaring. My headlights are on, and this random trees, like, I'm just looking at this tree, and it was March. It was like, almost spring, and this tree just, it grabbed my attention. My headlights are on. I has the only light that's on this tree, and it just felt like me. It felt like it was like this tree that was dead. It looked dead. It looked like there was nothing going to come out of it, but there were these little tiny little white buds that were just kind of sticking up off of them, and I just kind of looked at that tree. I took a picture of it, and I was like, what is this tree? And I went home and I looked at the picture, and I just kind of took it in and just prayed, like, God, what is this tree? And God just kind of was like, Katie, it's you. Like, you feel like you are dying. You feel like this is way more than you can handle. I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm working in you. I'm just like this tree lost everything. I lost everything. It felt like I was losing everything. I did not, but it felt like I was losing everything. But he was doing something inside of me that was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. And I think about the vine and the branches and how scripture talks about the pruning, and like I was pruned down to nothing. But there are these little bitty flowers that were white and pure and beautiful. And they just kind of reached towards heaven. They pointed straight up. And it just felt like me. Like all I could do in that brokenness, in that loneliness, in that just kind of dead place was just look straight up. Life looks a lot different. It's really awesome. I've remarried, and Brian and I have been married almost 2 years now. I no longer am in full-time ministry, but I teach kids every single day, and it is the best thing ever. My faith is mine now. I believed it. I believed Jesus. I believe the promises that are in His scripture. I'm Katie Gear, and this is my storm story.
You say I'm alone. When I don't feel a thing, the enemy wants you to believe that you're alone. The enemy wants you to believe that the grief is going to crush you. The enemy wants you to believe that you're unloved. But like that song says, I want you to hear the voice of God when He says you are not alone. In the middle of your storm, in the middle of your marriage, in the middle of your kids, in the middle of your career, in the middle of your loneliness, in the middle of your grief, you are not alone. And it's a promise that God will never, ever, ever leave or forsake you. See, this is the part I didn't know that I was going to do. Been where you're at. I don't know who I'm talking to. I've been where you're at. I've been where that pastor was. Not in, that would have been 2001. I ate a bunch of pills, and I drank a bunch of beer. And right before I got to an intersection, I looked up and I said, if you want me, take me. I don't want to do it anymore. I closed my eyes and I stomped on the gas. And I drove my truck through a brick wall, trying to take my own life. I didn't think there was any hope. I didn't think anybody loved me. I didn't think anybody would understand. Such a lie. I've got parents. I've got friends that I could call right now. And they would drive from Missouri and Texas and Northport and Tuscaloosa and Birmingham and all over But at that moment, I was like Elijah. I don't want to do it anymore. If you're in here tonight and you doubt that God loves you, if you're in here today and the grief is so overwhelming, if you're in here today and you're ready to give up, I want you to hear His whisper through that song. You are not alone. Don't believe the lie of the enemy. In the biggest raging storm of your life, there's a whisper. There's a whisper. And that whisper simply says this: you are valuable. You have purpose. And I love you. Bow your head with me. God, this morning, I know for a fact that there's people in here that are going through a storm. I know for a fact that as Christmas and Thanksgiving come, that there's going to be grief and shame and depression. They call it the holiday blues. I call it the attack of the enemy. And it's crushing. And God, it's overwhelming. And those waves get so high. And there's times that people just want to stop swimming and sink. Like Elijah, they feel all alone. God, I pray this morning, as we open up the altar, if there's somebody in here this morning that feels that God, you will speak to them. That God, as they come to the altar, they may not even know what to say. But God, you know what they're saying. And God, I pray that you wrap your daddy arms around them. I pray if they're afraid that you wrap your daddy arms around them. I pray that if the demons come at night in their dreams, that you wrap your arms around them. I pray if their heart is so broken that it's shattered to pieces and it looks like it can never be put back together, that you wrap your daddy arms around them. And God, as a church, I pray that we don't bash it, but that we surround it. We're surrounded by you. God, thank you for being an awesome daddy.